Hi friends, how are you doing? Hopefully you can all hear me clearly. Just let me know if the audio is not okay. I've got the mic on, so hopefully all is well. I'll wait for a bit so that more people are notified about today's session and then we can get started. Today's topic is going to be how to handle arguments. So I am really excited about this topic. I'm usually excited about all my topics, but this one is particularly close to my heart because I find that in today's busy, hectic lifestyles for most people, avoiding arguments is becoming quite difficult for many people. So hopefully the strategies I share today and of course all the insights you will be sharing with me and any questions you might be asking me will help all of us learn better, not only how to avoid arguments, but how to actually handle them when they do happen. So I will wait for just a few more moments so we have enough people who can listen right from the start. Can you hear me clearly, guys? Whoever is here on board at the moment, can you hear me? Okay, so today's topic is how to handle arguments. And while I'm waiting for everyone to come on board, I'm going to share with you my usual practice of 3 quotes that I've collected, which are related to this topic of handling arguments. The first quote I wanted to share with you was, "You can never win an argument with a negative person. They only hear what suits them and they listen only to respond." Let me repeat that. You can never win an argument with a negative person. They only hear what suits them and they listen only to respond. Basically, what this is saying is that if you get into an argument with someone who is intrinsically negative, chances of you winning that argument are quite slim because they will only pick those parts of what you're saying that suit them and they will conveniently ignore the rest of whatever it is that you are explaining. I think that is a fantastic quote. And the second quote I want to share with you is, "Discussions are always better than arguments because an argument is to find out who is right and a discussion is to find out what is right." And I think this is a very important distinction when you are in a conflict situation, either at work or with your friends or with your partner. It is very important to remember the distinction between a discussion and an argument. An argument tends to focus on finding out who is right, whereas a discussion is focused on finding out what is right. And in the end, finding out what is right is far more important than a temporary victory of you winning over the other person. And the last quote I want to share with you related to arguments is, "You don't need to accept every invitation to every argument." I find that one of my most favorite quotes. You don't need to accept every invitation to every argument, which means that it is quite okay for you to walk away from some battles. It's quite okay for you to walk away from some arguments. Now, how you're going to do that is what I'm going to share with you later in today's session. So please do say your highs to me as you log in. Let me know because I love connecting with everyone. Today I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I will take a break after every 5 or 10 minutes and respond to whoever has said their highs and their hellos so that we don't sort of break the link of whatever strategies I'm sharing. Okay? Now I'm going to ask you a question, and I know people are logging in. I can see them logging in as we talk. So while they're doing that, let me ask you a question. Have you ever got into an argument that you didn't want to have, or one that you regretted pretty much straight after. I'm going to repeat that question. Did you ever have an argument with someone, even though you didn't want to have an argument? You had no intentions of having an argument. Did you ever have an argument that you regretted pretty much soon after? I know I certainly have. So many of us get into arguments quite reluctantly. We don't want to be part of that argument, and yet somehow we get dragged into conflict situations. And then later we're scratching our heads and wondering, how on earth did this happen? So I'm just going to see if I can scroll through this. Let me say my highs back. Hi Smita, hi Sujata, hi Neelu, hi Vanita. Neelu says, I've started walking away from arguments. Fantastic. That is an awesome thing to do. There are some battles indeed that we need to walk away from. Of course, it's very important to also recognize that while it's good to walk away from some battles, if we continue walking away from every single confrontation in life, we are in danger of being taken for granted by other people. So, like with everything else in life, it is important to have a balanced approach. There are times when we must walk away from arguments, walk away from some battles because they're just not worth it. But at other times, we must make our point and we must participate in a discussion, because if we don't, if everyone keeps avoiding arguments, social change will not happen and we will not evolve as people. So what I'm going to share with you today are those strategies and techniques where you know when to walk away and when to hold your ground. All right, so what are some of the most common reasons people fight? Can anyone tell me that? What are some of the most common reasons people end up fighting? Now, that could be spouses, that could be your friends, that could be your co-workers in the office. Whatever it is, what are some of the common reasons people get into arguments? What are some of the common reasons why arguments begin, even when you may not want to be part of this battle? Firstly, many times people need someone to blame when things go wrong or when things don't go according to their own plans, right? You've all heard of the blame game, where someone ends up blaming you for something they did. That's a common reason why arguments begin. The most common one, of course, is having different world views or different points of view. When two people look at life from completely opposite ends of a telescope, it is very easy for them to get into a conflict situation. Neelu says money and relationships. Very true, Neelu. Those are two of the very common reasons why people argue with each other. Money, how to raise children. Sometimes it's not feeling heard or not feeling appreciated. These are triggers why people get into arguments. Jealousy, insecurity. These are some more reasons why arguments begin. So I just want to, before I get into the actual strategies for handling arguments, I want to let you know a couple of things that one must keep in mind. Firstly, it is very common for us to want to win an argument, right? And when we bring in concepts like winning and losing into an interaction, then we're treading on dangerous ground, because nobody likes to lose. So if you go into an argument thinking that you've got to win it, come hell or high water, you're going to make yourself more miserable than the other person, right? Because an argument is not about winning or losing. An argument is about finding the solution that works for both. So ideally, you need to have a solution that is a win-win approach for both of you, where you both benefit from whatever is decided upon. So you need to focus on having a discussion rather than an argument. And the other important thing to remember before we get into the strategies is the importance of actually listening. Because human beings are people, human beings want to be appreciated. And when we feel as though the other person has not heard us, has not understood us, that's when the problems begin. So listening is very important. And the second thing I just mentioned was to not go into an argument thinking you have to win it, because there are no winners or losers in arguments, right? So if you want to be happy in the long run, I would suggest and highly encourage you to give up this mindset of always wanting to win your argument, because that kind of victory in many ways is quite empty and it doesn't bring you any joy in the long run. Smita says superiority complex is a big reason for arguments beginning. Very true, Smita. A lot of people are narcissists, they're full of themselves, they have a superiority complex, and they think it's my way or the highway. And people like that make it very difficult for others because they want to have that argument and they want to win it at all costs. So that's absolutely right. Now I'm going to actually, depending on how much time we have today, I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. First, I'm going to share with you 1 or 2 strategies of handling arguments with your spouse or with your partner. And then I'll talk about maybe a strategy or 2 about when you get into an argument with your friend. And then we'll talk about how to handle conflict situations with co-workers or your colleagues in the workplace. So let's say for now, let's start with arguments with your partner, with your spouse. The first thing and the most important thing is to practice empathy. Now, I'm not sure how many people know the exact meaning of empathy, but in the simplest of terms, it is the ability to understand someone else's feelings and to see things from their point of view. Okay? So empathy is the ability to understand someone else's feelings and to see things from their point of view. So it is very, very important when you're dealing with an argument with your partner or your spouse to practice empathy. I'm going to explain this a little bit more. Typically, what happens is when we get into an argument, we are not listening to understand. We are listening to respond. Have you noticed that many times the other person is talking and you're not fully tuned in? What's actually happening is while they're talking, because you're so angry by what they've just said, you stop listening and in your mind you start formulating your own response, your own explanations, your own reasons, etc., etc. Because that's all we're focused on, getting our point across. Which is why the other person often feels as though you've not heard them, and that makes them even angrier. And so we get into this vicious cycle where no one wants to listen to the other person, and each person is only thinking about what they're going to say when the other person stops talking, right? So how does one practice empathy? I'm going to explain that to you, and then I'll come to your questions as well. Okay, so let's say the other person has said something that makes you super annoyed. They've just given you their point of view. They've told you that they want you to do something or they don't want to do something, etc., etc. So you flare up and you immediately attack them by saying, no, this is how it should be. Okay. Now, empathy, when people are practicing empathic listening, what they would rather do is when someone tells you something you don't agree with, don't just jump in with your own attack. Firstly, you need to change your goal in the argument from wanting to win to wanting to understand 2 very important things. And those 2 important things are, what is it exactly that the other person or your partner is seeking from you? And the second important thing is, why are they seeking that? Why are they asking that? What is at stake for them if you don't listen or if you don't agree with their point of view? What are their reasons for wanting that particular thing from you? Okay, now many times people are not familiar with their own inner workings. They're not self-aware, so they themselves are not sure why they're asking you to do something or not do something. So many times your partner might simply shrug and say, well, I'm just like that. Don't try changing me. Now, if you take this at face value and think that, okay, it's time for you to give your point of view, you're going to achieve nothing. In fact, all you're going to achieve is more argument. So when someone says, that's just how I am, don't try to change me, I would suggest you say something like, I'm not trying to change you, but it would really help if I understood the real reasons why this particular issue is so important to you. Now, when you do this, most of the time, the other person is taken aback because they're not expecting you to want to see things from their point of view. They're expecting you to get into an attack. When they feel that you are actually hearing what they're saying, when they feel like they've got a voice, when they feel like you want to see things from their point of view, they tend to back down, they tend to relax, and they are more open to listening to your point of view when they finish talking. So remember, it is very important to not say anything about your own viewpoints till they have finished fully explaining what they want and why it is so important to them. When you show this kind of empathic understanding, where you're understanding someone's feelings, where you're understanding why they're saying what they're saying, why they want what they want, it makes the other person a lot more willing to meet you halfway. And if not halfway, at least 25% of the way. But hey, that's a lot more than if you had jumped right in and attacked them with your own issues. So let me take a moment here to... Neelu, you say, can I ask a question? Of course you can. Please do. That's the whole point of these live sessions, is for you to ask questions and for me to answer them. So Neelu, go ahead and ask whatever it is that you want to ask. And Vinita says, how to deal with these people who have superiority complex. How about if your spouse doesn't have empathy? Vinita, very, very valid questions. I always say that the only person you can truly change at any given time is yourself. We've all heard that, right? But most of us feel, what's the point of me changing? The other person has shown no signs of change from their end. But it is important to remember that, yes, ultimately we can change the other person, but to do that, we have to change how we perceive them. Because when we change how we look at them, our behavior changes towards them. And when our behavior changes, their behavior towards us also changes. So Vinita, I am going to share some more strategies in today's session, but empathic listening truly begins with us. Until we begin practicing, I mean, we need to ask ourselves whether we are, in the genuine sense of the term, practicing empathy. Or are we letting our ego, are we letting our hurt feelings, are we letting our insecurities creep in, which is stopping us from being fully empathic to the other person? So like I explained at the start of the session, empathy is the ability to see things from the other person's point of view. When your spouse insists my way or the highway, typically what we do is we become defensive and we say, no, I'm not going to do it, or we start crying, things like that. Instead, develop curiosity to understand, what is it? Read between the lines. Yes, they're asking for X, but could it be that they really want Y and they're not able to express it? So our job in empathic listening is to fully understand what our partner is asking for, but that is not enough. We need to know why they want it so much, why it's so important for them that the children should be raised in a certain manner. Why is it so important to them that they want to invest in a new property? So you need to ask those questions as, why is this so important? Let me understand why it's important before you start giving them your opinion about that issue. All right, so that is empathic listening. The second thing I would like you to remember when you are in a conflict situation with a spouse or a partner is emotional triggers. Now, some of you may have read this Facebook post I put up, I think, yesterday or a couple of days ago about emotional triggers. Now, you may have found out that sometimes your partner or your spouse will say the exact words that make you super duper annoyed. They know exactly which buttons to push. They know exactly how to put you in a bad mood. Now, how do they do this? It's because they are aware of your emotional triggers, even though you are not aware of your own emotional triggers. Now, emotional triggers are words or situations that bring out some kind of an emotion in you, an emotion of anger, frustration, sadness, guilt, etc. Okay, I'm going to give you an example, which is the same example I had explained in my post a couple of days ago. Let's say that one of the things that makes you the most angry all the time is when someone criticizes you about your choice of being, let's say, a stay-at-home mom. Okay, so let's say you've got young children, you've decided that no, you want to be at home and look after your kids during their formative years, but your partner believes that you should be out there building a career. Now, your emotional trigger could be that every time this topic comes up, you are filled with feelings of insecurity and you are filled with feelings of self-doubt. Your partner may have recognized this, and sometimes if they really want to make you annoyed, they will deliberately bring up this topic and they will deliberately say something like criticize your choice of staying at home when you should be out there achieving professional goals. Now, what happens? You are not aware of your own emotional trigger, so you fall into the trap of getting into an argument. You may have noticed, my friends, that sometimes people start arguments just for the fun of it. Right? And what do? You fall into that trap, you ruin your mood, but the other person merrily goes off to enjoy his or her life. It's not worth it. So the first thing is to know what are your own vulnerabilities, what are the things that make you upset or angry or sad or fill you with self-doubt. And once you're aware of your own emotional triggers, it is much easier, much easier for you to walk away from that particular argument, or at least to have a more reasonable and controlled conversation without losing your temper. Okay, let's see what Neelu has to say. Neelu, you've said, even if I'm empathic towards this person who is very close to me, they wouldn't understand and will aggravate it to another level. So how to deal with someone who has this issue? Sorry for the long question. You don't have to be sorry, Neelu. I loved your question. It is a very, very valid question. Now, I always say that if we keep thinking that I am doing everything, the other person is not doing anything, we get into a victim mode. A victim mode is a mindset where we think the whole world is against us. When we get into a victim mindset, it is very easy to carry this mindset into other parts of our lives. We will have that mindset not only when we are with a spouse, we will have that mindset when we are with our in-laws, when we are with our friends, when we are with our boss, our colleagues, etc. So it's very important to not have this victim mindset. If we keep thinking, I am doing my best, the other person doesn't do anything from their end, we get into this victim mode. And that stops us from coming up with new and creative ways to handle that particular situation. So Neelu, there was a quote once, I can't remember who said it. It is, if we keep expecting new results by doing the same thing over and over again, it means that we're fooling ourselves. So if you want new consequences, we have to change some habit of ours, some habit of approaching, some habit of dealing with that person. Because remember, the only person you can really change, Neelu, is you, not the other person. Okay, and again, I'm going to talk about in a moment how to know which battles to pick and which not to. So I would suggest that I'm sure you have been empathic towards people that you are referring to, and they may not be doing their bit, but I've just explained two important ways to do empathic listening, and I suggest you practice that. The first one is to find out exactly what this person is asking for without losing your own cool or temper. And the second thing is to truly try and understand why is it so important to them that they want you to do X, Y, or Z. Two things will happen when you actually tune in to the other person. A, they might realize that they are being unreasonable and they may back off. And B, they might be able to explain it so well to you that you are both able to meet halfway and come up with a solution that is a win-win situation for both of you. So I suggest practice this kind of empathic listening, and nothing is achieved overnight, but it is worth a try. But more important than anything else, move out of the victim mindset. It is not you against the rest of the world. If we keep thinking that, we're going to limit our ability to think of new and positive ways to handle conflict. Now, how do you know which battles to walk away from and which to actually fight? A lot of people say to me, Nim, I know I'm supposed to not accept every invitation to every argument, but how do I know which argument to accept and which not to? The two most important words here are costs and benefits. Okay, before you get into an argument, ask yourself what is at stake. What do you stand to lose by getting into this argument? Those are the costs of the argument. Now, if the costs of arguing are higher than the actual benefits of getting into that battle, then you need to walk away because it is just not worth it. There are some issues in life where if you argue with the other person, what you stand to lose is so much and so bad that it is just not worth it. But sometimes you will find that some issues are very, very important, and the benefits of participating in that battle and voicing your opinion and having your opinion heard, the benefits are high, and at that point you need to participate in that argument. So these were some strategies for handling arguments with spouses. I know I just have a couple of minutes left, but I do want to touch upon how to deal with arguments with your close friends. And because I'm short on time, I'm just going to very briefly touch upon it. The most important thing to remember is agree to disagree. Now, let's pick a contentious issue that is happening at the moment in India. We've got the Me Too movement, which I've been reading about in India. And I know a lot of friends are having heated debates about this issue, talking about whether women should be speaking up, not speaking up, when they should speak up, whether or not they should speak up anonymously. Now, both of you, you and your friend, might be having very, very strong opinions about this very important matter, right? But it is not worth breaking off a friendship simply because you don't see eye to eye. Okay, it is perfectly possible for you to be good friends and yet disagree on certain important issues. So rather than sulking and breaking off the relationship, breaking off the friendship because your friend has such radically opposite views to your own, I suggest that you voice your opinion, explain your side of things, how you see that particular issue. Let them tell what they believe in about that particular issue. And then if you don't see eye to eye, just agree to disagree and move on. Now, important matters like these, like for example, the Me Too movement, these are issues relating to social change. So I believe for matters like this, it is firstly very important to have an opinion. Okay, when people say, I couldn't care less about it, or I don't really have an opinion about it, I'm always confused when people say that, because how can we evolve as a society, as a race, unless we have opinions? And having strong opinions is not a bad thing. So it is important to have an opinion on matters related to social change. It is very important also to share those opinions. But in the end, if people close to you don't necessarily agree with you, it's also okay to agree to disagree. And lastly, let's talk about how to deal with conflict with your co-workers. Okay? So the most important thing to remember when you're having an argument with a colleague at work, the only thing I would really stress upon is that you need to find common ground. Common ground is to find something that you both agree upon. So let's say you've gone into the meeting room to have this awkward conversation with a particular colleague who has been giving you a hard time for the last few weeks. Rather than simply jumping in and accusing them of doing X, Y, or Z, I suggest you start cordially and try to have a discussion whereby you come up and discover something that you both agree on. For example, if you're both working on a particular project, get the other person to agree that what both of you want is for the project to be completed in the time frame and in the budget that is specified. What happens here is the minute you find something you both agree on, you'll find it is a lot easier for you to have an amicable discussion. And there is less conflict when you have both begun the conversation by finding common ground. So guys, it's 4:32. I must sign off now. I hope you've enjoyed. I'm going to end with one of my own quotes, and that is, walking away from an argument is not defeat, just as having the last word is not victory. So hopefully you've all enjoyed. If you've enjoyed it, please do share this video with your family and friends, because I hope that they will benefit from it too. And also don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Nim Golkar. I'll see you next Sunday with yet another topic to help you get ahead, both personally as well as professionally. Take care. Bye for now.